gonna let her introduce herself and share a little bit about what she does in her story, and I hope you guys all enjoy.
Thank you. So my name is Natalie Waters. I'm a race car driver around the Northwest. I started racing when I was 6 years old, and I just graduated high school last year. So you're all about my age. Right now, out in your shop, I've got one of my cars out there. It's called a Focus Midget.
Yeah, Nolan saw it, and I had to drag him down here.
Well, we'll go see it. But I drive 3 different cars as of right now. We just sold one of them. So the car that's out there is a Focus Midget, and it's called a midget for a reason. It's very little. But then I have a sprint car, which is, I have a picture. So I brought these, so before you leave, you can grab some if you want. So this is my sprint car. Well, my old one. I just got a new one. And so I drive that and a modified. And so this is my modified. And this is the one we just sold. But to just give you a timeline here, I started racing when I was 6 in quarter midgets. I practiced a little bit in go-karts, but quarter midgets was safer as they have a roll cage and a very good seatbelt system and things like that. I raced those till I was about 12 years old, and I became very, very successful. I won many races, and then I did have some wrecks. I rolled a quarter midget once when I was 8 years old on the dirt. So the quarter midgets were both dirt and asphalt. And I rolled a quarter midget on the dirt, and my grandpa, who's here today, he ran up to my car and he's like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I was like, "Flip me back over, they're passing me." And that's kind of how it started. And then when I was 12, I wanted to race on the big track at Rocky Mountain Raceways that was in Salt Lake City. And they wouldn't let me race any of the pool cars until I raced a Junior Stinger, which is just an old beat up car they put a roll cage in for 12-year-olds to run around in. So I learned how to drive stick, and I went and ran that car, and I hated it. I got in it, and the way I was raised racing is you don't touch, and you are respectful to your other drivers. You pass clean and you pass fair. And these cars were like a demolition derby, and I was always fixing the car. I mean, I had a bumper fall off, and we had to set the toe after every time we went out on the track. So I only raced those for 1 year, and that was enough for me. And so the track let me jump into a Focus Midget, and I was 13. Just because I had experience. Normally you'd have to be 14 years old. And I raced that car at Rocky Mountain Raceways mainly, and then we did an end of the year race in Vegas. My top finish my rookie year was 3rd place. And when you race these cars, you're racing against all men of all ages. There's no division of your success or how fast your car is. Just midgets race against midgets. And so the oldest person I raced against was 75 years old, and I also raced against my uncle. His name's Jimmy Waters, and he has been racing for 40 years. He's won so many championships, and those were the people I was racing against at 13 years old as a rookie. Never been in a car bigger than a quarter midget or a Junior Stinger. And then my 2nd year racing, or I should tell you, so when I was in Vegas, my last race of the year when I was 13, I had only raced against about 10 cars, and we showed up in Vegas, and it was cars from all around the nation, and there was 23 cars racing on Vegas bull ring. And so I wasn't there to win. It was my rookie year, and these guys were the top of the top in the midgets. So I got not at this. That was at Rocky Mountain Raceways. So I got in my car in Vegas and went to race the main event. And a lot of people that were there were people I raced against. So I knew some of the field who I had an advantage on and who I didn't. And there was a car in front of me that was, me and him were pretty even, and I was working on passing him when 2 cars in front of us had tangled. one ended up in the wall and one was facing the wrong direction. And the car in front of me had seen the wreck before I did, and he slammed on his brakes, and I jumped his tire. And so we're open wheel, and so the second those tires touch, you're hopping, and so I hopped his tire, and before I had landed, the second I landed, I hit the tire of the guy facing the wrong direction, which sent me rolling. I slid on the hood of my car into the car that was in the wall, and so if you see on these cars, it's hard to tell on these pictures. I'll show you on this one. But the top of the car is all open, and so when I hit that car that was in the wall upside down, his tire came inside my halo, and there was rubber all down my helmet, the face of the helmet. It cracked the back of the helmet, and when I hit, it made me bounce on all four tires, and I kind of woke up and I shut the car off because the gas was stuck. So I shut the car off and I stopped and I got out of the car as fast as I could, because these cars run methanol, which when it catches on fire, there's no flames. And so it's very hard to tell if someone's on fire, if the car's on fire. So we are trained to get out as soon as you can. If you wreck really bad, you don't know what's broke or what's on fire, what's leaking. So I went to jump out, and the safety crew was there, and they come up to me, and we wear head socks for fireproof because of these cars. So all you can see is my eyes. And the safety crew walked up, and they're like, "Oh, you're not on fire. You're all right, buddy. You're good." And "You're good, man." And I took my helmet off, and they're like, "Oh, you're a girl, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "No, you're good." And then they checked me out in the ambulance, and they said I was fine. My car was totaled, but I was okay. And so my grandpa sat me down in our garage, and he told me, "This was a terrible accident. My uncles have been racing for 40 years and they haven't had accidents like this. So if you want to be done, we understand. We can do something else. I'm also an avid hunter, so if we can put our money into hunting, we can do something else. We're totally okay with it if you don't want to do this anymore." And I was hurt. I was like, "Absolutely not. This is my passion, and this is what I love to do." And the whole year I had been afraid of wrecking and getting hurt or catching on fire. And now that it had happened and I was okay, I knew that I didn't have to be afraid anymore. And so that's what I told him, and we got a new car, and then I won the championship the next year. So in my 2018 season is when I got the sprint car, and I raced both the sprint car and the midget back to back. Some nights both cars, and it was really hard. And I was actually on the news, on Fox News, for being the youngest sprint car driver in the history of Utah. I totaled that car as well, but this time the way you sit is straight up and down. And so in order to get in and out of these cars, you have to pop off the steering wheel and get in, put it back on. And mine was not latched all the way when I put it back on. And so these cars, these sprint cars, have this one was a limited, it's got about 500, 600 horsepower. And when I stepped on the gas to come out of the corner, they have these big wings and stuff, so you have so much downforce, you just hammer down and you stick to the track. And so we went green practicing, and I gave it full throttle and set you back in your seat, and that steering wheel came right off, and I hit the wall head on. And I've never been so afraid in my life than to hold a steering wheel that's not attached, going 100 miles an hour. And I act like the whole bottom of my foot was bruised because I hit the brake so hard. And I never got out of the car. They hauled me off the track, and I didn't want to get out. It was the very last night at Rocky Mountain Raceways before it was torn down, and I had grown up there, and it was not only devastating that my car was totaled, but I wouldn't get to race my last race on the track I grew up at. And as I pulled into my pit, there was another sprint car driver who had brought his sprint car into my pit without the seat and told me I would be in his car for the race. And I got in and he told me, this is not a winning car, this is just for you to keep your points. So every race we get points towards the championship. And he's like, this is just for you to keep your points. I was in third, and just go out on the track and race your last race. This is not a fast car. I'm like, okay. So I go in and we get a safety lap so I can practice, make sure it runs okay. And all we did was put our setup on the car instead of his setup. And when I went out, I broke the track record qualifying.
Okay, I have to ask about this car was.
It was Rob Powder.
Destiny's brother.
Yes. His Crowther. And what's really, I mean, this story is great. I was like finishing it, but Crowther, when I was 8 years old, I used to walk around the track with a little quarter midget tire and ask for racing funds to support my racing quarter midgets, and most people would drop the change in their pocket and whatnot. And Crowther, 10 years before, had given me $100 as long as I promised not to beat him when I raced against him. And then he was the one that offered his car to me 10 years after that. And then that night I was racing both cars, and so this car over here, this is my spare car. So my uncle was driving it, and when we went out for the last race at Rocky Mountain Raceways, me and him were side by side the entire race. First and second, second and first, just back and forth the whole race. And as we crossed the start finish line, I beat him by 0.02 of a second. And so my grandpa owns the cars. His name's John, and people kept wondering that didn't watch, like, who won the race? Like, John Waters won. His car, the only two cars he has crossed the start finish line at the same time. And that same night, I went out in Crowther's sprint car. After I broke the track record qualifying, I almost won the heat race until I ran out of gas on the last lap. And we went out for the main, and I won the main event, and those were the first races I had won at Rocky Mountain Raceways. And the only races I'd won is it was the last night. And that same season, we were also running the midget in Pocatello, Idaho, Meridian, Idaho, and Twin Falls. And we just were making the races we could out of town and making the best of the season, not really keeping track of points. And we got a call from Twin Falls asking if we were coming to the last race. And we're like, oh, I don't know, we're getting some stuff ready. And they're like, well, just want to let you know you're in the lead for the championship. If you want to come to the race. And like, we didn't even know. So we drove down there and we won the Idaho State Championship. So that was a really great season. Then in 2019, RMR was shut down, so we were forced to travel to Idaho to race. And so I ran in Twin Falls and a little bit in Meridian, and it was a bad season. I had another terrible wreck. What happened is we were coming to green, and they threw the green flag, and the car in front of me was a little slow on the green, and so I just barely bumped the back of him. And he was a rookie, so he spun out, and I just went high to avoid him, just going slow. And a rookie driver that was half a track away from us, saw an accident and freaked out and froze full throttle. And as I jumped the tire of the guy that had spun out, and the front end went up, and as the front end went down is when he hit me. And he hit me full throttle, and I was just inching forward. And it sent me flipping in the air. And we have some tape on the halo of the car, and that tape was on the catch fence 18 feet high. And then I landed on all 4 tires, and he was still full throttle. As we were stopped, he was stuck up on top of my car, and you could still hear his engine revved as high as it'll go. And he broke his sternum, but I was fine again. I had hurt my back, it knocked the wind out of me when I landed, and so And this is also a heat race, so we have qualifying, a heat race, and a main event. And so we still had another race for the night, and I was in the points. And so even though I was hurt and mad and whatnot, I went and asked the track if I could race my spare car for the main event. And they told me no. But it was really hard to recover from that, so we didn't finish well for the season. But then in 2020, I raced my last season in the Focus Midget, and we won another championship. But during that season, we were having an issue. We were really competing hard for this championship, and I was full throttle, and for some reason, the cars I was side by side with would leave me by the end of the straightaway. And I kept telling my grandpa and telling people, and they're like, no, it's the way you're driving. Like, I'm telling you, I can feel it. I can feel when that car lugs. And then another racer behind me said something about it. It's like, I can see it. I mean, we're both full throttle, and they gained by the middle straightaway to the end. And so we dynoed the car, and the way it dynoed was much less horsepower than the other cars. So I got a new motor, and we got it all set up on the dyno, and I went out and broke the track record in Twin Falls. And we started gaining more points and getting back in the competition and won our second championship. And so at that point, we're like, we've mastered the midget, we need to move up, do something different. Because my ultimate dream is to work my way up into NASCAR, and there's no way to do that if you stick in one class and just wait for someone to recognize you in that class. You gotta move up. So I moved up into a modified, which is the hardest car you can master. And so in these midgets and sprint cars, you're on a slick tire this wide, and you have 600 horsepower, you weigh 1,000 pounds, you're flying, and then you get in a modified, and now you have almost 700 horsepower, and you're on tires this big. And so you hit the gas, and your back end sliding all around just from hitting it that much instead of this much. And that was very hard for me. And I struggled a lot. And what was also different about these modifieds is that I can have a spotter. So someone to tell me where the cars are on the track, what I need to do different, if there's a caution, where it's at, all that sorts of stuff. So my grandpa was my spotter, and he was in my ear the entire race. It's like, they're gaining you here, you've got a car on your outside, and whatever, and I'd never had that in the midgets and the sprint cars. And so now, without the modified, I have to relearn how to do it on my own. But in this modified car, we struggled and struggled, not only because I was trying to learn, but for some reason, I would be going on the track, and in a split second, that car would just spin. And for me as a driver to not feel that coming, I knew something was wrong, because I can feel when that car gets on edge. I can feel when it's pushing or when it's loose and whatnot, and I just couldn't feel it. The car would feel fine, and then all of a sudden we're going around. And it gave me a bad reputation and a bad name, because people would be like, oh, there goes Natalie spinning out again. And so, I hated it, because I know a car, I know how to drive a car, and this something was wrong. And so then all of a sudden the car was super, super tight, and so we took a ton of cross out of this car, and to the point where people were telling me, when you go out, this car is gonna be looser than a freight train. You have got, like, just be super easy, we just wanna see if this makes the difference. And the car would still push to the wall. And so we went to take tire pressures and everything, and where you'd stick your hand between the panel and the tire, you couldn't get your hand in there. And normally you have all kinds of room. So this has got to be our problem. So we jacked the car up, and where the spring bucket was catching on a bolt, and so the spring would compress and get stuck, and wouldn't be able to come back up. And so when you hit the brakes and the car goes forward on the rear end comes up, it would come off that spring, or the spring would come off that bolt, and that's what would send me spinning. And so then we solved that issue with 2 races left out of 26. And so then we did that, and I went out to race, and I was full throttle the entire track, and everyone was lapping me. And so I came back in, and now the butterflies aren't opening all the way when I'm full throttle. So we fixed both issues after a whole season of struggling, and I won the race. And so that made me feel better as a driver, because all season I started questioning, am I really a race car driver, or am I just yeah, like it's not me. Okay, it was the car. I knew I wasn't crazy. And so then I raced that season in the modified, and also ran a couple of midget races. And then in 2021, I just raced the modified, and we moved into a higher class. And so, well, different group of modifieds, which is called the Speed Tour. So we raced in Hermiston, Oregon, and Meridian and Twin, and against 23 guys in the routinely, but when you look at all the modifieds that raced the whole season, there was about 43 different cars, and I placed 4th for the season, and so that was a big accomplishment. But racing with these hard guys, and it was difficult. It was a lot harder to race against them than just my local guys, and I didn't. Then when I went and raced with the local guys, it was like it was a piece of cake, where before it was a struggle. And I became friends with these guys, and some people, like, I post videos and whatever, and I'm like hanging out with these 30-year-old guys that I race with, and it's just such a different experience. And we built these friendships, and their friendships I'll have the rest of my life, these families and racing communities. And so it's just been a great experience in the modifieds, but now it's time again to move up. And so we just purchased a sprint car, and this one, the other one, was a limited 360 motor. And this one's an open 410 motor that has about 700 horsepower. We would have brought that car, but it currently does not have a motor. It's being refreshened, so we haven't got that back yet. But I heard you guys walk through the Autorama, and it will be there. So we're happy to get to show that off finally as we get it put back together. But yeah, that's my story. If you guys have any questions for me.
Do you want to share about your bullying?
Oh, sure. So, one of my big things, because I found it, if I have so many people following me and I'm traveling to these different places, why not spread something with that? Have a voice about something. And so we came up with this race to end bullying, and it's become a big thing. And a lot of people want me to talk about it and want to be a part of it. And so I just wanted to share with you real quickly to always be kind. If somebody walks in and is different in any way, don't automatically judge them. Be kind. If you see something happening, speak up. And just always remember that to treat people how you want to be treated. But that's what I have for you guys. Again, any questions?
I think we'll get them when we walk down.
And as you walk out, feel free to grab anything. I have a schedule up here, and then just hero cards, and I can sign them if you'd like. I brought Sharpie, and we have these bracelets. We didn't have enough of one thing, so we brought more of everything, so there's not enough if everyone wants the same thing. But yeah, if you want to come up and grab something.
And then we're gonna walk up to the shop.
Hey, can we put your glue in here?
I'll put it out there with the car.
Out there, better.
Huh?